Good evening, everyone. My name is Erin Hayes. I am the current chair of the City of St. Paul's Police Civilian Internal Affair Review Commission. Welcome to the 2022 Annual Summit. It's a time to review the previous year's public data from the Commission's activities. Before we really get into the program, I'd like to take a minute and introduce the Commission members and staff who support our work on the PCIARC. So again, my name is Erin Hayes. I'm from Ward 2. Vice Chair Charles Dineen from Ward 4. Commissioner Eric Forstrom from Ward 4. Commissioner Nancy Rodenberg from Ward 3. Commissioner Chevelle Webb from Ward 1. Director Christian Butler from the HERO Department. Deputy Director Beth Commerce from HERO. Coordinator Kevin Carlisle from HERO, Senior Commander Nicole Spears from the SPPD could not make it with us tonight. She is enjoying sun in Florida versus our snow here. And also we have Sergeant Kathy O'Reilly and Sergeant Stephen Petron from the SPPD Internal Affairs Unit. We have a lot to be thankful for in St. Paul. We have a mayor and city council who are committed to doing the work of public safety differently. The Community First Public Safety Framework and other initiatives that are powered by the Office of Neighborhood Safety are helping meet the needs of our community in ways that traditional approaches to law enforcement haven't. And our police department has been at the forefront of training officers to meet the standards set in the 6 pillars of 21st century policing. But despite these worthy initiatives, and now more than ever, civilian oversight of policing has a critical place in our community. The National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement takes as its motto, "Who will guard the guards themselves?" And the answer in St. Paul is the PCIARC. We take the responsibility of providing checks on real and perceived power very seriously. We aim to be fair in our assessment of cases and fierce in our advocacy of our community's expectations of our police department. You will have a chance later in the program to hear directly from our commissioners, but at this time, we have some guests who are here to share their wisdom with us. I'd first like to welcome Director Christian Butler of the St. Paul Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity Department to tell us about the department and about his support of the PCIARC.
Thank you very much, Chair Hayes. Good evening, everyone. Again, thank you all so very, very much for joining us tonight. As Chair Hayes has already stated, the PCIARC is an exceptionally important commission to the City of St. Paul, and it is volunteer-based, so we do appreciate the efforts and commitment of the actual commissioners, but also the public, because this is why PCIARC is here, to serve you all. So thank you all for coming out to learn about PCIARC and what it is we do. That being said, my name is Christian Butler. I am the director of HERO, as Chair Hayes stated. And up on the screen here, we have a slide with our motto on it, which is something that we live by each and every day within our department. Serving St. Paul residents and businesses by advancing justice and equity through education, advocacy, and enforcement. Within the HERO department, we have 4 major divisions. We have the Contract Compliance Division, Procurement Division, Labor Standards Division, and Human Rights Division. Along with those divisions, we also manage and oversee 5 of the city's commissions and committees. In addition to PCIARC, we have the HERO Commission, and many thanks, quite a few of the HERO commissioners are here with us tonight, including the chair, so many thanks to all of you for joining us. We also have the Mayor's Advisory Committee for People with Disabilities, better known as MACPD, the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Aging, better known as ACOA, and last but not least, the Labor Standards Advisory Committee, LSAC. And the easiest way to explain to people what HERO does is we enforce the civil rights and affirmative action and equal economic opportunity laws and requirements within the City of St. Paul. Now, with that, it is my great pleasure and privilege to introduce our mayor, Melvin Carter III, as he comes to share some thoughts and words with you about PCIARC and the work that it does. Again, thank you all. Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good evening. It is really good to be here for a number of reasons. It's just good to be inside out the cold. But more than that, I'm really proud of the body of work that we're here to reflect on today. As we immerse ourselves in sort of the race of city building, we always want to do something sooner and faster and get an announcement out and get a press release out and talk to the press and do the interviews, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the conversations Director Butler and I always have is this is the one department who is charged with saying, hold on, wait a second. Let's make sure we're doing things right. And as we look at the body of work that really embodies our values, our Department of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity becomes central in us ensuring as a city that people have access to earned sick and safe time. Our Department of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity becomes central in us ensuring that as we raise the minimum wage, that our employers know how to be compliant so that our workers can benefit from that policy, and it becomes essential in ensuring, helping us to steward the relationship between our community members and the law enforcement officers who serve us. My father's a retired St. Paul police officer, and he always laughs at the term community policing. And I asked him why once, and he said, well, I grew up in St. Paul. I came up in the St. Paul Police Department, and community policing to my father, community policing to our St. Paul Police Department, community policing, I know, to our incoming chief, Axel Henry, is something of a repetitive phrase. Our community, our police officers are our community, and our community includes our police officers. That's something we know as other places around the country get stuck in this police or approach to public safety. We know that it's all one and the same in our community. I tell folks with regard to this body of work quite often, I'm so confident in the men and women who wear the St. Paul police badge, it doesn't bother me to turn on the lights because we are a city that withstands that scrutiny. We have, I believe, an incredible police department. We have men and women who have shined in the face of a global spotlight. We have men and women who work all day, every day to ensure that our residents, our children, our families, our businesses can operate in a safe environment. There's nothing more important. There's no more sacred role that we have than making that the case, because whether it's our educational goals, our academic goals, our economic goals, our housing goals, all of the goals that we have to be built upon a safe and stable community for our residents and community members. One of the things, the conversations that our new chief and I have had, I have a theory that if you took 1,000 high school varsity point guards and put them in a room with Steph Curry and quizzed them all on their level of satisfaction with their three-pointer, that Steph Curry would probably get last. And one of the things that we know is the way greatness works. It isn't about getting to a point of greatness and sitting down. Where you find greatness is simultaneous. Where you find greatness is strongly correlated to the places where you find people who wake up every day and know that yesterday's greatness is irrelevant to tomorrow. That we have to find our greatness every day. That relationships, all of us who are in relationships at home or in our families at work, we all know that the process of building and sustaining and maintaining a relationship is really never complete. The process of improving ourselves and our ability to implement community-first public safety, to implement 21st century public safety strategies in our city, that process is never complete. It's never something that we graduate from. It's something that we wake up every day with fresh energy for. And so I just want to say I appreciate all of you for being our commissioners. Chair, thank you for your work. Thank you all for your work, for standing up and being a part of this conversation and sort of forming that bridge, sort of helping us form that bridge to ensure that our community members know we hold ourselves accountable for excellence in our community and that we hold ourselves accountable for transparency in our community. Because one thing that I've learned about trust is it cannot be built in the dark. And so that's what much of this work is about. I'll sit down in a second, but I have to say this. 2022 has been consumed by St. Paul, in St. Paul, with the process of selecting a new chief of police in our city. And one ritual tradition that we have in St. Paul is falling in love with our police chiefs. And you know this, every time we say goodbye, say farewell to a police chief, we look and say, oh my goodness, how in the world could we ever replace Chief Finney? How in the world could we ever replace Chief Harrington? How in the world could we ever replace Chief Smith? How in the world could we ever replace Chief Axtell? And what that means is every time we see somebody from within our ranks rise up to the level of leadership and carry that baton forward in a way that really makes us proud. And I have to tell you, I'm really pleased by the ability to appoint and to yesterday see unanimously confirmed by our city council our next speaker in this space. I don't know if I'm supposed to introduce him or if somebody else is coming back up. I'm seeing nods. Usually if I say something like that, somebody says, yeah, go ahead. We're in a tricky spot right now. Here in Minnesota, we're at the intersection. Some might say the epicenter of two conversations at once. In the wake of the pandemic, we've seen violent crime rise everywhere in our country, in every major city in our country. And it brings to us an acute sense of just how much we need the men and women who serve our city in uniform. And we also know that just a couple of years ago, not too far from here, the world saw one of the most horrific events in modern memory when we bore witness via video to the murder of George Floyd and the way that our Twin Cities community found ourselves at the center of this global awakening on race, on public safety, on policing, on police community relations. And so it should be tricky to find a person to lead our police department through a moment like this. And the truth is it was tricky, but not for the obvious reasons. It was tricky because we had so many incredible candidates come from within our police department. We were able to find someone right within our ranks who is a product of the St. Paul Public Schools, whose first job for the city was with our St. Paul Parks and Rec program as just a young person in our community. Somebody who has extensive patrol experience and command experience in every single part of our city, and somebody who has been on the forefront of what we're talking about when we talk about community first public safety. I always tell people, I see you looking at your watch and I'll be quiet. I always tell folks, our approach to public safety has to start way before somebody calls 911. It has to start, it has to be about not just racing to the scene as soon as possible after something bad happens. That's emergency response, and it's critical. If we're going to focus on public safety, that's got to start way before something terrible happens. We need a chief who understands that our city is safer if our city has housing. We need a chief who understands that our city is safer if our children are hopeful about their future. We need a chief that understands that our city is safer if people can access a job that allows them to take care of their families. And one of the things that really excited me is the ability to identify somebody who is a data-driven person who loves to get into the numbers and whose career has exemplified from leading our blueprint for safety here in St. Paul, which completely transformed the way we serve, care for, and help prevent issues of domestic violence from escalating to beyond control points. To the person, and also who was the person in our St. Paul Police Department. It came time for us to implement body cameras in our department. The person we look to lead that implementation. I am very, very, very excited and humbled and thrilled for the opportunity to work with your next speaker, and that is our next St. Paul Police Chief, Axel Henry.
All right, you guys hear me okay? Yes. Not altogether sure I'm supposed to follow an introduction like that, but I'm going to give it a shot anyways. So as the mayor said, and I'm very humbled by his introduction, my name is Axel Henry, and I'm the new police chief for the city of St. Paul. I won't bother you with a big resume other than to say that I appreciate everything he said, and just about all that's true, although it's a lot to live up to. Thank you for being here tonight, because this process is crucially important to what we do as law enforcement. Our goal in St. Paul is to co-produce a public safety model for all of our citizens. And it's important that we underline or stress that term co-produce. It isn't co-produced if we do it by ourselves, it isn't co-produced if we do it for you, and it certainly isn't co-produced if we do it at you. We need to come together and do it together. As I was sitting there, I had some notes that were given to me about things that I should talk about, but I was a little inspired by folks that I saw walk into the room, and so I thought maybe it would be better if instead of discussing and really getting deep in the weeds about what co-production looks like and what the public safety model is, I just give you a real life example. These aren't ideals of things that we are shooting for or targets or dreams that we have that we think if we cross our fingers and we behave ourselves, we can do a really good job. So I'll refer back to something the mayor said, and I have some witnesses in the room, that's why I chose to tell this story. When we started the body camera program, many of you may remember, Minneapolis PD was also going through this process. And after the first year of their body camera program, the public was not very happy. They weren't happy with how the program was rolled out. They weren't happy with how they were recorded. They weren't happy with how little they knew about the process and those types of things. And nobody was very happy with the law that surrounded the body camera footage. In fact, that footage at the time could be deleted almost any time you wanted to. We could record things and there weren't rules about retaining that. Well, in St. Paul, we decided to do that a different way because we believe in co-producing public safety with our community. My friend Yusuf Mjeni is sitting right here, and we started our meetings with the NAACP long before we ever even knew what kind of camera we wanted to buy. We started talking about what that policy should look like. We held meetings all over the city to discuss with the public what exactly they wanted out of the body camera program. In fact, what they wanted out of their body camera program. As we always like to say in St. Paul, we're not the police department, we're your police department. And that means that you get a say and you have to have a say in how we do it. Otherwise, again, it's not co-produced. And one of the best things that came out of that process was that when it was time for the law to be changed to actually address the kind of data that gets recorded on a camera and gets recorded with an audio device, and the old law was written in 1981, when data was a piece of paper that we would just black out parts of the words that we didn't want you to read. We testified separate from Minnesota Chiefs of Police, the Minnesota's Peace Officers Association, and every other police lobbying group out there. And Yusuf and I sat together with Sergeant Stiff and the other members of the NAACP, and I will tell you this is a true story, and I would ask you please, if you doubt any of it, to ask Yusuf after this. I'm sure he'll be happy to tell you the story. That legislators from northern Minnesota that didn't understand what it was like to live in a city, certainly didn't understand what our community wanted, came up and said, you know, I didn't really think I understood or wanted to change this rule, but seeing you sitting together, clearly as friends who respect each other and understand each other's needs and the versions of what they want to see come out of a program like this, it changed my mind. And they wrote a law exactly how the NAACP wanted it written, which allowed for local control, local rules about how we did things here. So when we talk about co-producing public safety, I attended grade school at Webster Magnet just down the street here. It's now called Barack and Michelle Obama. And there was a time when we're young, you'd have a spelling test, maybe 5 words the teacher wanted you to learn. And some of you may remember this. Trade papers with your neighbors. You might do that. And if your neighbor was your best friend, maybe a word that, maybe a letter that was maybe misrun was kind of written over a little bit. Sometimes you even got the luxury of saying, go ahead and correct your own paper. And that's sometimes a little ethics check for you. We can't be in the business of simply checking our own papers. It's not because we're not trustworthy, but there's no other possible way for us to make sure that we have the trust. Trust isn't something that's going to be, as I'm a data-driven person, isn't something we're going to find on a spreadsheet. Trust is an emotion, and it's something you have to work for and earn every day. It's like physical fitness. You don't work out for a week and then you're done and you're set for the rest of your life. That's not how it works. It's something you work at and you earn every day. And so I use that as an example today because it's not an ideal or a goal. We know how to do this in St. Paul. And your role in this, the PCR's role, the public's role, the community's role in helping us co-produce a public safety model is crucial. And it's what's going to make us successful going forward, and it's what we need to continue to doing in everything we do. So I've taken up enough of your time. I get the cool honor of getting to introduce the next speaker. Pastor Pittman is not only the president of the NAACP for St. Paul chapter, but he's also a founding pastor of the House of Praise and Church of God in Christ. I would say my favorite attribute of him is I also consider him a friend of mine. So please welcome him up here.
Well, thank you once again for allowing me this opportunity to be here to speak with you on this evening. I'm here also with my parliamentarian, also the vice president of the Dakotas, State of Minnesota of NAACP, Yusuf M. Jenny, and I'm also here with the vice dean of the Mitchell-Hamlin Law School, Jim Hilbert. He's our education chair. And I just thank them for coming out. These are the two individuals that we've met over the last 3.5 years with our public safety to come up with a revised edition of the 21 agreement between the St. Paul Police Department and the NAACP. We worked very diligently over the last 3.5 years, going through some of the things that need to be updated. A lot of things changed in the agreement. One of the things that changed is what Chief Axel Henry just spoke about, is the body cameras. Back when the agreement was looked over by the Justice Department, when it was given to us, Nick Khalid, and it was started under Chief Finney. This agreement 21 years ago, there was no technology, wasn't as such where we had body cameras. And as Chief Axel Henry just mentioned, him and Yusuf have worked very diligently in the beginning of that stage when body cameras came into play. There's a rich history behind this whole agreement, the PCR, and the process that it takes to help support the community and people that have issues and complaints when there's what you would say bad policing. And so what the PCR is there to do, they're there to grab those complaints and make sure that they get heard. All community citizens are heard and fairly treated. This agreement is crucial because some of the addendums that we made inside the agreement that we worked diligently for were things like no knock warrants, how to communicate those things when there's shootings that involve officer shootings that involve black community, because we know through numbers and statistics that a lot of the black community are ones that are shot and killed. And one of the things we want to affect in that change is that we want more of our black young men and women to be able to make it to the courthouse or to the justice system before leaving their cars or leaving the streets and go into the morgue instead of to have a rightful trial and question. And so what this agreement does for us and the NAACP, and we work with several people over the period of time I've been the president of the NAACP for just the last almost 3 years now. And we had to do a lot of things to bring us visible back into the side of the people, because a lot of people are asking the question, what are you guys doing? And I'm not so much one for doing a lot of marching, even though I understand that marching is the voice, writing is the voice of the community when they're not being heard. But one of the things I believe in is that sitting down to the table with those that have the powers to be and talking over any situation or any ills that we have in our community. This agreement is so rich to our community. It's going to help us in our efforts by collaborating with our new chief, Axel Henry, and I want to say that I appreciate him because I've been watching him over the years, and I believe him to be a good man and a fair individual and a community guy. And I was just telling him yesterday, after his swearing in that we both graduated from the same high school. Both were Minutemen from St. Paul Central. And and just that alone, being a St. Paul Central alumni, that we can go back to work together as partners from the same high school. That's just a little something. But we have collectively this agreement. What it does, it helps the community feel safer where there's transparency, accountability, respect, and empathy. These are some of the things that some of our police department has faced. And I'm not going to try to talk long, but since we've been dealing with George Floyd, the pandemic, so many economic changes, the educational challenges, I was just torn back. We worked on the education department where our children in the BIPOC and Black communities, their achievement levels were so low. Our achievements were so low within that is that we were the lowest in the nation, and we're Minnesota. We're Minnesota. And so these are some struggles that we've had, and by communicating, people want to feel safe driving in their cars. They want to feel safe that they can make it home. There's mothers that want to feel safe that their kids can make it home, that their students can make it home, and they want to be safe and feel safe in St. Paul. And I'm just proud to say that St. Paul and the NAACP and the St. Paul SPPD have worked together continuously. With Todd Extell, he was a big component also in the last 3 years. He worked hard with us. We meet every other month to talk about and and we did advancements in the agreement. And I have no doubt that Axel Henry will do just as great job, if not even better. And so we just are looking forward to working with the community to continue. Now, I want to make it clear that this is not just the signing of the agreement, the addendums that we made in the agreement. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. We'll be meeting, and we'll be meeting here soon with the chief and his staff. We're going to have quarterly meetings with the NAACP to go over the numbers to see how our community is being policed, monitoring. We have the advisory committee here that works hard to make sure that policies and different things that are in place, and that those things that are within the agreement, that they're being implemented into our community and in our process. And just having a good relationship with the community so the community can trust that we will effectively advocate for them and the communications. And I'm gonna tell you that St. Paul Police Department has been faithful, and whenever there was an incident, whether it was a police officer involved shooting, I always got a call. They called me, informed me of the situation, and let me know that it's being handled, and when we get full detail. And part of this is for the transparency so that that when we advocate that we don't go out with the wrong information. What we want to do is the idea is to bring the community together as far as police department. They're part of our community. To churches, I'm a pastor first. Churches are part of the community. NAACP, 109-year-old organization that has been advocating for many years, and one of the greatest civil rights organizations in the world. And we have helped so many people, even though we don't realize. Some people say, well, we don't see you out running around the corner and shouting and screaming. I said, no, change needs to be done behind closed doors in the legislation. Laws need to be changed. Policies need to be changed. In order for us to have effective change, we must sit down at the table and talk about change. And truly, I'm glad to have come here tonight. I'm not knowing if I covered everything that you needed to hear, but I believe there's some questions here that will be asked of us, and we'll be happy to answer any of the questions that you have on tonight concerning this collaborative partnership. And that's what I want to call it, a partnership. And I'm excited about working with Chief Axel Henry and his staff. So is the NAACP partnerships that we have with other community leaders. We're excited to get this thing going and to improve the relations of St. Paul. So St. Paul can be that roadmap to several other cities of how it needs to be done. Thank you.
Why don't you have a seat with that microphone?
Oh, gotcha.
So we're going to do an audience Q&A, and I'm your only runner because we only have 2 microphones. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and I will come your way. I will not hand you the microphone. Don't be offended, but I'll get real close to you. You see that it doesn't have to be real close. So who wants to start us out? If you don't have a question to start out with, I have many. So. Okay, great.
So, it was mentioned in the information packet that the chief disagreed with 7 out of the last 17 agreements of the PCR to impose discipline. With the disagreement rated that high, how can you have faith in the process?
So, in the spirit of making sure I answer your question honestly, those obviously weren't my decisions, so wasn't a part of that part of the process. But what's important to also remember is there are different ways in which those disagreements can come about. So, for example, if a complaint were to come in from an external source and it came in and our officer did something that by policy or by procedure was actually the appropriate thing, whether it was the way they handled a vehicle or they moved around and they did something, and what we realized was this event exposed to us that we had a failure in the systems the way we designed it. The policy had failed. There might be an example where the PCR would say this deserved discipline, but the previous chief had said, well, no, we actually think we as the department failed the officer by putting him in that. So we're not suggesting that simply because the officer didn't get punished for it or get a letter of reprimand, that we didn't recognize that we as the department maybe made a mistake, but it's possible that we could have guided something through a policy that needed to be changed or fixed. So there's going to be those events that happen like that, if that makes sense.
That's fantastic, Chief. Who has another question? Wow, this is a really shy audience. I can't believe it. Okay,
I wanted to ask, what is the process of picking a sheriff? Like, what do you have to go through in order to become the sheriff? Oh, Chief, I knew that. I'm just, it was a long day.
No, that's totally fine. So just to realize, I figure I'll answer the first part of the question, then I'll answer the actual, what I think was the question was. Sheriffs, as you all know, are elected officials. So our sheriff here in Ramsey County is Bob Fletcher. He runs for office. That's why you see street signs. That's why you don't see street signs with police chiefs, because we don't run for office. We're not elected officials. And that's very good for a number of reasons. That it's a different process. It should be a different process. Some folks have argued that police chiefs should run for office. I don't have a strong opinion about that, other than I think there's some issues that go behind the elected process that don't really apply to what a police chief should be. So here in St. Paul, the city council decides what the criteria is for what they want out of a police chief. So the last time, before I was picked, the criteria was actually stricter, meaning that you had to have, I believe, 5 years in command, or 6 years in command grade of the rank that I held before I became the police chief. You had to have X amount of degrees and those kind of things. So they get to lay that out, and that service had to be done in a city greater than 500 people, more than 500 police officers in a city of a certain kind of size. The current criteria was they wanted you to have at least a 4-year degree. They preferred you to have a master's degree, which I have. They preferred that you had been to a command college like the FBI Academy, which I have. And then they wanted, I believe, 4 years in command experience. I have 12. And then they wanted a bunch of other things that were demonstrative of that. So there's a basic minimum qualifications that are picked by the city council. Then you have to go through a very rigorous process, which includes an entire part of a group of city folks that are selected. They apply with the mayor to be on the selection committee. There were people in this room that were on that. And then when you come out of that, 5 finalists are picked, and then they go in front of public forums and eventually are submitted to the mayor for interviews and a bunch of other interviews. So it's a very long process, as the mayor explained, but there's a whole lot that goes into it, and it's very strongly community driven.
Chief, thank you. This question is for Pastor Pittman, because you already described correcting your own spelling test. And by the way, in my elementary school, we had 10 words on a spelling test, not 5. So, Pastor Pittman, can you tell us why you think a police citizen review commission is important, please?
It's very important for a police commission to be represented. It needs to be representation for people that don't know where to go or don't know how to communicate with the process of feeling discriminated against, or feeling their rights were alienated, or feel like they were profiled, or feel as if their rights were taken from them. It's important that the PCIARC is available, the Citizen Review Board, so that these things can get forwarded to the chief, so that whatever actions that need to be taken are there. One of the processes that the agreement has is that there are training measures that are given, that are now in place, and I know that they've already are practicing them for how to police our community, how to communicate with the community. We don't tell the police department what to do. Let's be clear. We don't tell them what to do. This is an agreement and a process that we have come together to try to make St. Paul better, make the policing better. But it's through the agreement and the efforts of the police department to want that. This is a relationship that a lot of cities don't have, that we have with the St. Paul Police Department. And so the PCR does great work. They're doing great work. And I was reading over some of the information that was sent to me, and I thought it was really great, good stuff. And I think they're doing an awesome job, and they help manage people that come to them with the complaints, and make sure that these complaints are heard, and making sure that that people are aware of their rights here in the city. And I don't know, I just want to give, because these are the guys that work with me, Yusuf or Jim, did you have something that you wanted to add with that?
Well, it's important for the police department to get feedback from a group of citizens in the community who look at and review concerns that are shared with citizens about their interaction with the police department. Plain and simple.
You good, Jim? Okay.
Great, thank you. Who has the next question? Okay, thank you, Maria. Maria's always got questions.
In the addendum to the agreement that you recently signed, you see that the no-knock warrants will only be used in life safety threat situations.
Yes.
Is that specifically defined somewhere in the agreement, or is that a St. Paul Police definition of the life safety threat?
It's defined within the agreement. If you read it, how many have copies of the agreement? I see some that do have copies of it. If you could,
We don't have them here.
okay. Oh, no, okay, good. But if inside the agreement, you'll see that it specifically stated that we would communicate together as NAACP, St. Paul Police Department, when a no-knock warrant is issued. Like I said, we don't tell them what to do, but we agree that we would communicate in order to make sure that everything is being done properly. We don't want any more mere rights to happen. A relative sleeping at a relative's house and becomes a victim of a crime that he didn't commit, and or loses his life, a young man with a future and promise. And so that's why we felt that was necessary to try to cure a lot of these addendums were done to try to cure some of the ills that our community is facing right now. Our community, they're fearful of, and so this is not the first time. We know all over the United States there are several different cases where there's been no-knock warrants and people end up losing their lives. And a lot of people losing their lives are people that are not criminals. They're law-abiding citizens. And so, Chief, did you want us to say something about that?
Yeah, so the way I explain this to lay people or folks that aren't really tracking this all the time is there is a time and a place for a no-knock warrant, and it literally is the crazy Hollywood scenarios that do happen once in a, 10, 15 years, where it really is key that law enforcement has the ability to make an entry without having to knock on that. My last assignment for being selected as the chief of police was in charge of the narcotics human trafficking unit. We do more search warrants in that unit than all of the other groups in the city added up. So every other group in St. Paul, if you added up all their search warrants, we do more of them. We do 51%, 53%, something like that. We haven't done a no-knock warrant in, I'm guessing probably, well, certainly not when I was in there, and I don't think the two previous commanders were in there, so it's probably over 10 years. St. Paul hasn't done one in, I think 5 or 6 years.
2016.
Oh, yeah, yes, 2016. The other thing is, to remember is, the chief of police personally, that means me, has to approve a no-knock warrant if we were ever going to do it. It's, unless I was, out of town or hospitalized or something, and then my delegate would do it. It's not something that someone could do, and it's so rare that it wouldn't surprise me at all if I went through a 6-year term and never even got asked to have one signed. We don't care about them flushing drugs down the toilet. We don't care. I mean, we believe if you're in the house, we can get you, we need to arrest you and you're a safety threat. We will wait and wait and wait. The public safety, the big piece of that is making sure that we're keeping our community safe, and that doesn't mean that we need to ram in doors or smash in windows unless that's an absolute imperative. And those situations, thankfully, are very rare. And so we are committed to continuing that process. We believe in that process. This is not something that has been litigated to us where they said, you need to change the way you want to do business. It is the way we actually want to do that business, and we believe in it. And I think that's the gold standard for when we have real partnerships. Because let's be frank, when we talk about partnerships, if it's a partnership, and this is very important to the work that the PCIARC does, is if we're partners and I don't listen to your opinion, are we really partners? If we're partners and we're not communicating and having discussions, are we really partners?
Sure.
We believe in real partnerships. That's what we want to do. Now, does that mean we're going to agree on everything we talk about? No. But I don't agree with the person I live with every day. I don't even agree with myself all the time. I've woken up the next morning and thought, why did I say or do that, right? But it means that we stay at the table, we keep working at it, and we actually have discussions, and we make things better.
That's right.
That's fantastic. Thank you. We have time for one more question for these two, and then we're going to move on to Chair Hayes, who's going to walk us through the annual summit. Yeah, sorry. I'm just tossing.
No worries.
Let's, I'm just going to pull it back.
This question is probably for both Chair Hayes and the Chief. In the annual report there, it indicates that PCR reviewed 21 cases. My question is, what is the total percentage of, what percentage does that represent of complaints received by the police department? And then under your watch as Chief, is there any discussion or intent to increase the number of cases that the commission gets to review?
I'd have to have
So,
Senior Commander.
the complaints come in, I'm sorry, I'm Senior Commander Sean Johnson. I have overseen or worked with Internal Affairs and PCR for the last 3 years. So to give you kind of an idea, complaints come into the police department in several different ways. They can come through the PCR, through HERO, they can call Internal Affairs and make a complaint to us. They can come through the mayor's office. They can stop in to the police department or online. So there's a lot of different ways they come in. We don't control how many complaints come in. What we do is any complaint that comes in gets reviewed to see whether in fact several things exist. Is it one of our employees? Because we get a lot of complaints about officers from other police departments, and so obviously we can't investigate those. So we review it, is it our employee? Is the complaint that came in, if it were to have happened, would it be a policy violation? In other words, if the complaint is that, well, the officers came to my house and they recorded me with their body cameras. Well, that wouldn't, even if that was true and that's what they did, that's not a policy violation. So therefore we wouldn't investigate a complaint like that. So what we have to do is look at what is the complaint, and does it involve our officers, and is it a complaint that would be a policy or a violation if it were true? And that's the criteria. And then once we get that, then we open those complaints when they meet that criteria. And if they're external complaints from the community, once the investigation is done, then those complaints are sent to the PCR for their review, and after that they're sent to the chief. I hope, does that help?
So do all complaints that come into SSP or St. Paul Police get to the commission?
No, because again, the only complaints that would go to the commission are ones that are actually open as an investigation because they meet that criteria. But when they come in from the public and they meet those criteria and they're investigated, they are then sent to the PCR for their review. Thank you.
There's I'm sorry, Chief. There's a list of which infractions, which policy violations can be referred to the PCR in your annual report. And one thing that was asked at the last meeting is, what if it's an actual crime, right? Not just a policy violation? And then those are referred, if you're going to have to give me the right words, if substantiated, if they feel like there's evidence, then they would refer that to the county attorney's office.
Yeah, if it's determined there was a crime committed, yeah, that would be then forwarded for.
Yeah, so that's totally out
Correct.
of the series. We are going to say thank you to the chief and thank you to President Pastor Pittman, and we're going to turn the floor over to Chair Hayes. So
Thank you.
Thank you, both Chief Henry and Pastor Pittman. I did want to go back and just address the last question that was asked regarding complaints that don't get back to the PCR. One thing that we have made a change to in our process is that each month our internal affairs liaisons will tell us the number of complaints received, the reasons that complaints did not get to us, and we are now tracking those on a monthly basis. So going forward, we'll be able to report more confidently the reasons why we didn't see a case, and also the number. We're continuing to ask more and more questions because as a commission, we do feel that transparency is very important to this work, and we don't have the credibility that we need unless we're able to really, as the mayor said, turn the light on and shine the light onto these processes. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to spend a little bit of time now talking about PCR processes in general. So we've had a couple questions already around the PCR intake process, and this is a really simplified flowchart of what happens to a complaint as it moves through the PCR process. So a complaint can be taken in by the HERO department, can be taken in by the police department. Coordinator Carlisle is our PCR coordinator. He can help answer questions or walk complainants through that process. Once it's determined that it is an actual complaint that does violate a policy in accordance with the guidelines, it goes through the internal affairs review and investigation process. And then those documents, any body camera footage, any additional materials, come to the PCR, and we review all of that evidence and we make the recommendations. During our meetings, we are very serious about this work. Every single commissioner gets a chance to share what their viewpoint is on the case. They get to make their recommendation on disposition. They get to make the recommendation on discipline if applicable, and we talk. Our meetings can go pretty late. And again, we are volunteers. We are civilians doing this work, but I want everyone in this room to know that first and foremost, the process to us is important. It's important that we are fair. It's important we follow policy. And it's important because that's how our civilian complainants know that they're being heard and being taken seriously, but it's also important to the police officers that are involved in these cases as well. So I want to really drive that point home. Once we make a recommendation, the police chief will issue a determination letter, and then if a discipline is issued, the officer can appeal. So this is where the police federation can come in and represent that officer, and then the complaint is finally closed. And a lot of what happens in this process is governed by data privacy laws, is governed by employment privacy laws. So in general, anything up until a complaint is completely closed out will not be public data. So I want to make sure as we head into our data dive, that you kind of understand we are governed by very strict employment and privacy data. If the chief decides to, uh-oh, we're frozen. There we go. If the chief chooses to disagree with what the PCR has recommended for either disposition or discipline, he'll issue a disagreement letter that goes to Coordinator Carlisle. Coordinator Carlisle will notify me, and as the chair, I have the option to meet with the chief of police to discuss the departure, and I will tell you that I meet with him every single time. We are not allowed, obviously because it's still private data and private employment data, to discuss the contents of the meetings outside, but I approach those meetings with the commission recommendations in mind. So I advocate for the commissioner's point of view. Again, sometimes those departures are upward departures from discipline recommended, sometimes they're downward departures. I have only been on this commission since January, but I do know that in the past there have been recommendations of no discipline that was a departure, and the chief decided to recommend a discipline. So the departures can go several different ways. Once the chief hears from the chair, and we have, I think it's a 5-day limit to meet with the chief, he'll make his very final recommendation around discipline, and then it moves further through the police department's employment. If you're thinking to yourself, this work sounds amazing to be part of, this is really great for our community, this is something that I want to do, there is a path for you. We are seeking commissioners, so we do have 9 available, or we have 9 spots. We have 5 that are currently seated, so we have 4 commissioner spots open. The process looks a little onerous, but it's worth it. If you want to be considered to be a PCR commissioner, there's an application you'll fill out online. You'll go through an interview, and we are accepting applications and hope to interview potential commissioners in the next month or so. There is a background check and fingerprinting required, and the reason that's required is because we access a lot of really sensitive data, and we do get access to the criminal justice information system. And then the candidates will be recommended by Hero. You heard from Director Butler earlier. He makes the final recommendations to the mayor, and the mayor approves his appointees. Then we're approved by City Council to be seated and sworn in, and then we can vote after the required training. And we do require that in order to vote as a commissioner, you participate in the Civilian Police Academy. There is one kicking off in January. So if you're interested in that, please come and talk to any of us commissioners. I'm sure the SPPD officers who are here can also help guide you in the right direction to sign up for that Civilian Academy. So here's our, ask. If you want to be involved, please come and talk to us, apply. This is very meaningful work, and I think everyone who sits on the commission would agree that what we do does make a difference. So now we get into the data, and I know some of you already have that PCR annual report, so I'm going to go fairly high level on this. There will be a Q&A session with all the commissioners after, so if you have specific questions, we can ask those questions at that point. But as was mentioned earlier, PCR reviewed 21 cases for fiscal year 2021. So again, that was January through December of 2021. 26 officers were involved in these cases. There were 26 allegations, meaning 35 total allegations. So there could be multiple allegations on a complaint. That's why there's a discrepancy in numbers. Of those complaints, 10 of them were around excessive force, 9 for discrimination, 16 for improper procedure, and 7 for improper conduct, 8 for poor public relations, and 1 was a firearm discharge. We have a few options once we find that there is a substantiated complaint. If we find an unfounded complaint, exonerated or not sustained, we won't assign a discipline, or we won't recommend a discipline. So in 2021, we had 7 unfounded cases, 6 exonerated, and 4 not sustained. If we find a sustained violation, of which we found 12 last year, we have several options to recommend for disciplinary action. So those range from supervisory counseling, an oral reprimand, a written reprimand, retraining, suspension, demotion, or termination. When we make the decision or our recommendation on discipline, during our meetings, we do review the officer's history of complaints as well as any commendations they've received. So we do get a little bit more information about their background to make appropriate recommendations for discipline. Now, the bottom two categories of policy failure and no action, when it's a policy failure, I think as Chief Henry alluded to, if the department has not set up that officer for success because the policy isn't great, because the training wasn't great, that's where we would find a policy failure. And unfortunately, I have been on the commission since January, so I have not seen a no action. But I don't know if Commissioner Forsstrom or Deneen, you've been on the commission longer, if either of you have.
Yeah, so I'm pretty loud. I'm pretty sure everyone can hear me. So sometimes no action will occur if we have an even number of commissioners and we're evenly split and we can't make a decision. Then that would be a case of no action, and then that would go directly to the chief to decide.
Thank you. We had one firearm case that was reviewed, and that was a not justified discharge of a firearm. It was involving a human. So we recommended discipline on that. Again, we can't get into specifics because of data privacy practices, but that is a type of case that we review. In terms of the discipline that was recommended, last year the commission recommended 2 oral reprimands, 6 written reprimands, 4 retraining, 4 suspension, and 1 termination. And the chief disagreed with 7 out of the 17 recommendations. And again, because of privacy rules, we can't disclose whether those were upward or downward departures or what that disagreement looked like. The next couple of slides are just around our demographic information. So who is reporting complaints against the department? We had a little over 55% of our complainants were female, 10 were male, and 3 were no answer. And you are not required to disclose your gender or any other characteristics when you file a complaint. We also look at our complainants by income. So a large amount of our complainants choose not to answer the income question. But of those who chose to, 3 of them made less than $20,000 annual income. We also report on race and ethnicity of our complainants. 17, or about 59%, were white. 14% or 4 were Black or African Americans. So you can see the split by race and ethnicity. And finally, we also report on disability status when it's self-disclosed. So 22 of our complainants did not answer that. We had 2 complainants who were deaf or hearing impaired, and we do offer accommodations and assistance to any complainant who needs those accommodations. And finally, by age, we have in the 38% are no answer, and of the remaining, or the next larger chunk, 31%, were 65 years plus. So now we're going to move into the Q&A. So this is your time to ask questions of us commissioners, either about our experiences as commissioners, what we enjoy or not enjoy about the role. If you have questions about the numbers or our process, this is our time to share with you. So come on up. Team up.
We're also going to have Senior Commander Johnson come up and Coordinator Carlisle. So they're going to pass this mic, and I'm going to try to run around to you with the other mic again. So.
There we go. We got it. Kevin's got it. I'm gonna start the mic with you.
Wow, okay.
You're on. No
Can you
pressure.
hear me? So what do you want me to say?
Well, okay,
Ask
you
questions.
you're our first question again, huh? I love it.
Would you all mind explaining the difference between when you would assign a complaint to be unfounded versus not sustained?
Unfounded? You can do that.
Sure, thanks.
I haven't had an unfounded yet.
Yeah, I could actually pass that to Senior Commander Johnson.
Put the microphone closer to me.
Oh, really? You don't think people can hear me? All right, very well. Oh, that's good. Everyone knew? Okay. Unfounded, I believe the definition is it didn't happen, right? So based on the information that was available to us, we didn't see any evidence that what the complainant said happened actually happened. And then not sustained typically is going to be there wasn't enough evidence for us to decide one way or another. Sometimes, and just to give you an example of that, sometimes it might be trying to interpret what someone was thinking, right? A complainant might say, well, the officer did it because of this, but we don't know what's in the officer's head, so we're not able to say for sure. We can't tell them, no, it didn't happen that way, but we just don't have enough information.
Perfect. Sorry, it's very sensitive microphone. Who's got another question for us, for our commissioners? For Senior Commander Johnson or for Coordinator Carlisle?
Hello. Given that this is a voluntary position, what motivates your participation? And how do you balance your participation with life?
That's a great question. What was the last part? Would you repeat it?
How do you balance participation with your life?
Oh, okay. Well, my motivation, I'm also on the NAACP, and I was asked to join. I'm the treasurer for
A little closer to the
I'm the treasurer for the St. Paul NAACP, and so I was asked because of that position. But I also have black sons that I worry about being policed in the community, and I thought instead of complaining about the police, I would join this, considering all that's gone on in the media. And honestly, you have to do a ride-along, and I really appreciate our police, St. Paul Police. It opened my eyes because you're so quick to point fingers, yes, but it is a frightening job when they're going on calls and you don't know what to expect. The time commitment, I'm very busy as well. I'm on like 5 boards in the community, plus I work full time and I have sons and family and church and all that. But it's about like maybe a good week before our meeting. It's one meeting a month. And about a week before I review the cases, I don't know how much time you guys prepare, but about a week before I start looking at if there's documents, reading those, if there's videos, reviewing them, and just setting some time aside because this is important work and I feel like I'm doing something in the community outside of complaining. So I commit to that, and it's not so overtaxing that I can come to the meeting and I didn't have time to review anything. It's fairly. Sometimes the meetings go longer, sometimes they're shorter, but it's not too taxing, so to speak. So.
Do you want
I'm also very new to the commission, came in the spring, February, March. What motivated me is I really wanted something meaty to do, to participate in the community and feel like I was doing something important. The other thing is this fits my background, and I'm a retired social work professor, and the complexity of these cases is interesting to me. The other thing, this has exceeded my expectations for what I was looking for in involvement. I found this process to be so dignified and procedural, and my fellow commissioners were very careful. and spoke very firmly. So coming out of academe, I wasn't actually accustomed to careful communication. And this is careful communication. And so it really sobers me in terms of my own participation. So if you're interested, I'd really encourage you, I really do. In terms of the time, I was sobered by the thought that there could be so many hours of involvement, but it hasn't turned out to be that way. Once I learn how to do the review of cases, I can do it pretty efficiently. Plus, it's so interesting that the time is spent in a productive way for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodenberg. Who has the next question? Oh, Maria. I appreciate it too. Maria gets put on the stage a lot. She's with the St. Paul Intervention. They're a program that partners with St. Paul Police, and they do domestic violence prevention and response. And they're really integral, essential to the functioning of our city, our police department, and they really, yeah, it's pretty awesome. So if you don't know about SPIT, you'll have to find out. So go ahead, Maria.
Thanks, Beth. I enjoy hearing SPIT's name anytime I can put it out there. So, no, I actually have two parts to the question. One, I'm curious how long your appointment is for, how many years you commit to. And two, I think Chairwoman Hayes, you said there's a total of 9 positions available and 5 are currently filled. I'm curious, on average, how many of the 9 are filled? Is that typical that you would have 5 right now? I'm just curious about that.
Do you want to go?
Sure, I think it's great. Yeah, so we are appointed for a 3-year term, and we can renew that once. So a total of 6 years is possible. And I have been on the commission now. I'm actually coming up at the end of my 3rd year. And in that time, I think probably what Eric's been on the whole time that I have the whole time that I have. And I think we've had maybe a full commission like 2 separate times.
Yeah, that's about right.
For probably a total of 6 months, maybe.
Yeah, that's about right.
So it's not very common that all the positions are filled, and it's less common that they stay filled.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
That's true. All of you apply right now.
Thank you. And I can just speak a little bit about why it is at times difficult to keep a full commission, because we do have the requirement that you go through the Civilian Police Academy, especially during COVID. The ability of the department to host those civilian academies was severely limited, but we are hopeful that now that things are coming back to a semblance of normalcy, that the department is going to be holding more regular civilian academies. Again, there's one kicking off in January, so if you are interested in serving on the PCR, even if now is not the right time for you, enrolling in that civilian academy for January will get you set up so that you don't have to wait for another one or wait for another opening to come for you to enroll.
Got a question, audience question?
All right, 2-part question again. First, during your deliberations and when you received information from Internal Affairs, do they provide any oral presentation to the committee or to the commission when you're reviewing that or deliberating, or are they there for questions to provide their perspective? And then secondly, when a policy failure has been identified, how is that policy failure remedied, and how is the commission notified that it's been fixed?
Would anyone like to take that, or is that on me? Or
whatever.
This is their time to talk. I didn't want to talk much during this.
It's okay. Sorry, the first part of your question again, please?
The first part of the question was, during your deliberations over cases, are officers there to provide their input, their perspective? Are the investigators who conducted the investigation there for available questions, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So it used to be, and even before my time, it used to be that, when Internal Affairs completes their investigation, they make their own recommendation. Prior to my term, it used to be that recommendation was made available to the members of the PCR to see. That is not the case, and that's deliberate because they want the members of the PCR to come to their own conclusion and not be swayed. And so when Internal Affairs presents the case, they simply read the summary. This is what the complainant said. Here's the allegation, and go at it. And in my experience, they do a remarkable job of answering our questions, because sometimes we do have questions about police procedure. What would be the normal procedure when this occurs? And they do a really good job of in my opinion anyway. They do a great job of telling us as much as we need to know without letting their own opinion of the case itself sway it. I have not noticed any kind of bias in their presentations or anything like that. So that's how that part goes. And then your second question?
Regarding policy, passive policy, if there's one identified, how does it get remedied and how is the commission?
I love that question. Since I've taken over as chair, one of the key areas that I'm trying to lean into, and my fellow commissioners have been amazing partners at doing this, is digging into policy, particularly when we see trends in our complaints. And so what we do is, our meetings have two parts. We have an open public portion of our meetings, and then we have a closed door portion where we deliberate cases. But we're devoting part of our closed door portion to diving in with Senior Commander Nicole Spears, as well as our two internal affairs liaisons, into the policies that we've noticed in cases. So we take the case out of our discussions, again, because the case deliberations remain separate, but we look at how is this policy being trained? How is the policy being revised? When was the last time it was looked at? And we're asking a lot of questions. Now, we've just started doing this in the past couple of months, so I'm hopeful that we'll continue to gain traction, but we have gotten quite a bit of good feedback given to the department, and I trust that the department is internalizing the feedback and is going to come back with some recommendations on the policies that we've been discussing.
Chair Hayes, do you want to give the example of when Spit came and talked about being at roll call and what your follow-up question was to them about roll call?
Sure. So, and this is a shameless plug for the public portion of our meetings. Again, we meet the first Wednesday of each month, and we have guest speakers who come. We also discuss topics that we can discuss given our data privacy laws. But we did have SPIF come and present about the work that they've done around the blueprint for safety. And one thing that really struck, I guess, me for certain was the rate at which the blueprint for safety in responding to domestic violent incidents, the rate at which the response changes get rolled out to our police department. And they actually leverage and utilize the roll calls to roll out quick changes that make real impact on how our officers are responding. And we asked Senior Commander Spears if it would be possible for us to attend a roll call where one of those blueprint for safety changes were rolling out, and they are going to let us know when the next one is so that we can attend if we're available. But it was a great opportunity for us to ask some questions more to the point about training, especially since we're digging into some of these policies that we want to change. You can't change a policy without having an action plan to train the officers who are in the field and doing the work. Anyone?
Thank you. Who's got another question? Oh, I'm sorry, maybe you want to jump in?
This is slightly different, but you mentioned training. And if anybody is considering being on this commission, I just want to say I've been really surprised at the level of professional training that I've received. So there's a national organization of police oversight commissions or committees, as they're called across the nation, that I have been able to participate in online, and others went in person. So I've been feeling that we're a part of a greater movement across the country to address policing. And so that has been really important to me in terms of learning. Also, I want to say that the police academy that I attended was just a wonderful opportunity to learn. So if you're considering to come on this, you really would learn a lot about policing across the country, not only here in St. Paul. So that was interesting.
Thank you, Nancy. We have a question from the audience.
I applied actually way before COVID. I'm on the list. So how do I find out where I am on the list, or do I have to reapply?
How you doing? Well, I started in June. So what I'm asking everyone, I would say, I can give me your name. I'll look up your name because I'm looking at all the applications, and then I share the information. Yes, and I apologize. So please, I'll get your information and then I will make sure.
My ride's on its way, so.
Yeah, I got you here.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate
I'll email
it.
her.
Yes, and I'll follow up.
Okay.
Okay.
All the applications go to Coordinator Carlisle, and then he brings them to the commissioners, and then they do interviews, and then the ultimate recommendations go to the mayor. So he's the guy. Who's got a question from the audience? I have one. Probably doesn't surprise you. What is one thing you all, including Coordinator Carlisle, including Senior Commander Johnson, what is one thing you wish the community knew about the PCR? Microphone closed.
Thank you. What I will say is this, I like hearing different point of view. So you may have your own point of view, how you see something, but you learn from others. So when we're in the meetings and I will say it's great dialogue. It's okay to disagree. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. And no one challenged you on your voice or your story or what you saw, but it's okay and it's a comfortable environment, and that's what I think it will be. It's a comfortable environment that you can say how you feel. We all look at body cam footage, we all look at all the information. The key thing is, I look at everything, we're a team, but it's okay to disagree. So that's what I think it's, and the friendship still continues. Because I look at us not just working together, but we also have a relationship as well.
And I would say the work is hard, but it's very rewarding. And we see some really bad things, but we have an opportunity in our roles to make change and to make sure that no one else has to experience those things that we've seen. So that's what I would really want people to know, is that it is hard work sometimes, but it's the most rewarding work that I have done, and it's the most rewarding thing that I have been able to tell my son that I'm involved in, and that's him right there, another Central grad.
Again, I would agree with both of you that one of the things, the discussion that goes forward, and I don't really know their backgrounds. I know she's a social worker, I don't know personally what's impacted you and why you decide things, but we're all impacted by what we see, and our backgrounds come into play, and my reason for voting for something might be totally different from his reason, but it's respectful. No one's looking at you like, I can't believe you said that. It's just, it's a forum where you can really express what you think about what you saw or what you read. And I think it's, like I said, I feel good about the work I'm doing here. It's fulfilling, rewarding, to just correct behaviors that might not be conducive to policing, or maybe, the cop wasn't thinking, or, it's a lot of emotion when you're looking at cases, and a cop could have an argument with his wife and come out and take that out on a civilian, or the civilian could be having a bad day and take it out on a cop. So we're able to view that from different perspectives and make decisions, and hopefully those decisions correct bad behavior or improve our community. So.
I'll be brief. I'll go with the same theme, right? I've found it to be extraordinarily enriching in ways in which I never anticipated. They say walk a mile in someone's shoes. That's not always pragmatic. And, if you're going to get around Thanksgiving dinner, you're going to have discussions about all sorts of things that might not go so well for your family. This is an opportunity. This has been an opportunity for me to learn from and about a multitude of different people, whether it was fellow commissioners who I've served with, whether it was complainants, and I'm trying to understand what their point of view was, or whether it was, with a ride-along with a St. Paul police officer, and actually experience a domestic violence situation right there in real time. You can watch it on TV, you can watch it in the news, you can read about it, but until you're there, it's really difficult to empathize. It's not difficult. It is much more real to empathize with both the person who's experienced domestic violence and the officer who has to be on scene with no information and try to figure it out. So it has been incredibly enriching, and I'm you know, I'm in a certain age group and a certain demographic, and other commissioners are different. And hearing their points of view has on occasion made me think about things in a much different way, because I don't know what it's like to be an African American woman. Right? But when I can get that perspective, it's extraordinarily enriching for me to understand that.
Yeah, for me to add on sort of to a similar point, it's been very, I would say, cathartic almost. A lot of what I consume anyways is usually, or I shouldn't say a lot of what I consume, but I see a lot of, you see bad police body cam footage on the internet, and it makes you upset. There's nothing you can do about it except write something mean in the comment section. And it's cathartic to be able to actually feel like you're doing something about that, especially when it's happening in your community. To be able to see something that maybe upsets you and to actually have a say in the outcome of the disciplinary process has been very rewarding, like everyone else has said, but it's also cathartic to be able to air those feelings with people who are directed towards the same goal as you.
I affirm what my fellow commissioners have said, but I would add that I wish people would know how exceptional this work is that this commission is doing, and the professionalism with which it is done. That was impressive to me.
Thank you. So I think probably from my point of view, which is probably different than the commissioners in some ways, but one of the things I think would be important to tell the community about what the work they do is that it's really important. The community hears things oftentimes from one point of view, the complainant's point of view. The commissioners hear it and see all the evidence from both sides. And sometimes from the police side it's not good. But other times they get to hear the officer's side of it, which is the correct side, and it's not the message that was sent. So I would tell people that one of the things to keep in mind is that these commissioners have the ability and have the privilege of hearing all the points of view, or all of the evidence, if you will, in a complaint. And sometimes that may differ from what the community members hear, and obviously the commissioners cannot share some of that, but to trust the decisions that they make, because they do have the luxury of hearing both sides of that. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, I know Chief Henry is a very stat-driven guy, and so one of the things I think is really important for our community, and I've been in police work for 31 years, I have certainly seen bad police officers and bad police work. I can tell you, and I don't say this with bias, I really mean that, this department I truly believe is different from most of the departments across the country. And one of the things, again, coming back to stats that I will tell you is, keep in mind that there was 21 complaints heard by the commission in 2021. There were nearly 300,000 calls for service for those officers. So if you do the math, 21 complaints out of almost 300,000 calls for services, I would say is pretty good.
Thank you. Our time is done. It's not working, Dan. My colleague told me to put it here and it would be fine, but it's not. We're almost done. The library closes at 7:30. PCR commissioners are going to linger a little bit and talk to you. We do have to be out by 8. Before we go, Eric is rotating off. Charles is rotating off, so it would be great to get a last word from both of you. And then Chair Hayes will let her close us out and encourage you to apply.
Yeah, I will be rolling off in January, I believe, will be my last meeting. It's been an honor to be able to serve on this commission and to be entrusted with reviewing all this information on behalf of my fellow citizens and also on behalf of bettering our police department. So I appreciate the opportunity, even though none of you voted for me.
Nice. Yeah, I'm the longest tenured commissioner. I'm rolling off in August of next year. That will be the end of my second term, so I've been around for nearly 6 years now. My motivation for joining the PCARC originally was Philando Castile. I'm sure everyone in the room probably remembers that whole incident. And what struck me was I got really tired of the armchair quarterbacks on both sides. Right? Well, he shouldn't have done this. Well, the officer shouldn't have done that. And I thought, gosh darn it, I'm sick of people armchair quarterbacking. How about we actually spend the time to learn about these things and actually do something to make a difference? Peaceful protest is great, and I understand the police officers are way more often than not very passionate about the work that they do. But as a citizen, I felt it was important for me to put my money where my mouth was. All right, very well. I guess someone doesn't want me to talk anymore. Nonetheless, if you are interested, absolutely please apply. Please consider it. If you have friends or family who this sort of thing might be important to them, encourage them to apply. I can't imagine anything that I've done that's been more enriching over the last 6 years. You know?
And just to close out our list of meeting dates, the locations for further out in 2023 have not been settled on, but they are always at a public space, rec center, library. But we have our next meeting December 7th at Battle Creek Recreation Center. There is a public portion. You are all welcome, 6 p.m. If you would like to learn more about the PCR, you can head to the stpaul.gov/PCR. There's tons of resources and information. Also, if you wanted to even just chat with any of the commissioners about our experience, we're happy to do that tonight or via email.
All right.
Thank you.